Joined alongside me today is my good man, Pete Greco. He is the VP of Sales and Technology and is the one who's going to talk about this career builder attack, the ultimate phishing expedition. I thought I was on the ultimate phishing expedition a few years ago off of Montauk, but apparently not. Apparently there was a new, better phishing expedition, and so I jest. But very interesting. So thank you for joining us. If you have been to our events in the past, you know how we like to do things, and that is moving at a very fast and efficient pace. We like to be into talking about relevant things and spending very little time on, well, not that we're irreverent, but just irrelevant things. We will try to not spend as much time. If you do have a question throughout Pete's presentation, please utilize the chat feature, and I will get your questions answered. Pete has the answer to everything, so please try to stump him with the good ones. But first and foremost, let's meet Productive in 1 minute, and then we will get into exactly what happened with the Career Builder attack. So, who is Productive Corporation, you say? Well, I'm so glad you asked, because Productive is a security and storage software expert for mid-sized companies. We have a dedicated staff that can help you with your licensing and technical questions, so you don't have to wait on hold and navigate the scary World Wide Web on your own. We also implement, test, and optimize the things we sell, everything from security assessments to penetration tests to implementation, AV health check, config, and UTM services. We do it. We also produce third-party content that we put on our website as well as our YouTube page. You can find that at productivecorp.com/content, as well as our YouTube channel, which is Productive Corp. The bottom line is we have the resources to help you. Whether it's implementation or assessment services, licensing, or optimization, we are here to help. Help at productivecorp.com, 800-726-4099. One of the ways that we help is by putting on our Productive Knowledge Series. And as you know, since you signed up for it, unless somebody forcibly signed you up, then I apologize for that. But here you are. We are talking about the Career Builder attack and how they were able to be very successful in harvesting from their phishing expedition. The man who's going to talk about it is Mr. Pete Greco. Pete is our VP of Sales and Technology and has helped literally thousands of companies better secure their environments. He knows the good, he knows the bad. He has Rolaids sitting by his bedside, so he knows what it's all about. So let's give a warm virtual round of applause to Mr. Pete Greco. Pete?
All right, thanks so much. Let me get control of this bad boy, Todd, and we'll get this party underway and allow everybody to get on to lunch or work or whatever is next in your day. So thank you, first of all, for coming. We really appreciate it when you choose to spend a half hour or maybe a little bit less with us. And so I'll get right into it here. So I think probably everybody on this call has heard of CareerBuilder. Some of you have probably found your job using it. Some of your organizations are potentially using it right now to find candidates. You know, an extremely large organization with tons and tons and tons of job posts for all walks of life, and that's what made these guys, you know, really just a good conduit here. So, you know, like I'm saying, these guys are a conduit to target HR people with a very specific spear phishing campaign that would ultimately deliver infected resumes via Word documents to these folks. And then in turn, the key stakeholder who's getting this resume initially, you know, is going to be likely to forward this on to other key stakeholders in the organization. And so it was targeting, you know, not every HR person was a target, or every organization, really kind of limited to software engineering and programming and finance roles. So somewhat specific, right, and very easy to write a custom resume that is going to be attractive to the person who's doing the hiring or doing the initial look. And so, this wasn't just phishing, it was laser focused. The hacker was able to search for roles on the CareerBuilder site, develop a resume that really is based off of the specifications and requirements and skill set that the hirer was looking for, to be able to get them to open that resume and then forward it on again to other folks who would actually end up being the manager of this role or the manager's manager of that role, right? And then that's where it would allow the next steps to ultimately unfold. So how sophisticated was this attack, right? They actually took a few older, less sophisticated tools and merged them together in order to create a slightly more complicated series of events. And part of what the brilliance was then was lining up multiples of these tools in the right order to really be able to launch and have success with an exploit. And so it includes a little bit of written social engineering, leveraging exploits, and really creating a good email and finding a target where you're going to have a higher amount of success in getting them to fall for the phishing campaign, right? And so, right now, Productive Corporation is looking for a few good men for our organization. And so if somebody sends me a resume through our process, I'm going to be pretty likely to open that up because it is the exact right place at the exact right time, right? So that's exactly what is going on here. So, what actually is happening as a part of the attack or a string of attacks? So the first thing, send that resume like we've been talking about to the key stakeholder who's going to end up looking at it, right? Only Word docs are what were compromised. So any candidates who had their resume in a PDF, that was not a part of a target, or no PDFs were infected. It was resumes built in Microsoft Word, and they were leveraging some very specific exploits. And this is a little bit of where they really developed a pretty solid exploit kit to have success. So the first CVE here, 3333, is really the first chain in the attack. And what it's doing is really doing a stack buffer overflow of RTF, right? And so this was patched ultimately with 10.087, and so it's only going after Office 03 and Office 07. Anybody who had those products were vulnerable. If they had applied this patch, or if they didn't have those products, the exploit would actually go down to vulnerability number 2. So it's trying multiple vulnerabilities, looking for one that works. As we get into 0158 here now, we're now including Office 2010, but not 64-bit versions. Right, and again, if that patch is applied, now we're going down to 3906, and this is going to start adding Office 2010 64-bit. Not going to hurt any systems that were running Windows 8.1 until we get down into 1761 here. Now we're also able to compromise 64-bit systems, Office 2013, as well as Surface tablets running whatever the Surface versions of Office are, right? And there's probably, yeah.
How long were these vulnerabilities, or how long did these guys take before that patch was announced, right? Or that vulnerability was announced, right? So obviously there's a patch. So what kind of window before these guys started, using it for phishing?
Yeah, they started using this exploit. So the exploits have been around a long time, Todd. So the first letter in the CVE, or sorry, the first numbers in the CVE actually indicate the year
Yep.
that the vulnerability was identified, right? So you can see we're talking about a 5-year-old vulnerability that is still being effective here in 2015. That's very concerning. The patch was actually out. And you know, I saw this when I looked all this stuff up. I think within 4 months of the vulnerability, but still today there's folks that have not applied that patch. And a lot of times what happens is, you know, you get fully patched up, you rebuild a machine with Windows 7 and Office 07, and you don't get all the patches applied right off the bat. Now you've actually taken a step backwards. Right? And so they are getting quicker and quicker to identify the vulnerabilities, but if the patches aren't getting applied, we're still pretty weak, right?
And would Microsoft, with their patching, identify that you didn't have an old patch, but you have new patches?
If you were using WSUS, are you saying?
Mm-hmm.
Or Live Update? Yeah, it would. Just the base level product would take care of it. You don't necessarily need a nice third-party patching system to be able to get these patches identified and applied. Right now, there's other things out there, and we'll kind of mention that a little bit later, where a third-party solution might be more appropriate for your environment, but the base level stuff would really handle this. Right? So lack of technology would not be an excuse at all. So next step here, right, is first we trigger that vulnerability, and that is pretty slick, right? They're trying the first one. If the patches, if it works, great. They're going on to step number 2. If it doesn't, they're trying the next vulnerability, and just keep trying stuff until they find something that works, happening in an automated fashion, right? So this is just off of one click of the email. So the next thing that happens is once that exploit is identified and triggered, you're going to receive an image file in a 7-zip format. Inside of that image is hidden the shell door backdoor dropper. Inside of that image, inside of that zipped file, 2 opportunities to hide from any kind of security scanner that you might be running. A lot of security scanners might be configured to skip over zip files, so that's your first opportunity to get through. If you unpackage that zip and scan it, plenty of security softwares are not actually scanning inside of an image, they're scanning the header, and so then a second opportunity to miss shell door, which is a commonly known backdoor dropper. So again, not a brand new thing. Now, once shell door is installed, it's taken advantage of using the TeamViewer Protocol, and I'm not hugely familiar with TeamViewer myself. I had to do a little bit of research on this. I had heard of it, but really did not realize how big TeamViewer is. And so lots of TeamViewer users out there. So the hackers are taking advantage of their protocol to establish a connection with their command and control server. And so if you are a TeamViewer user, you may very well have this whitelisted on your firewall or next-gen firewall or UTM, giving it clear access to go back through the firewall to communicate with the command and control server. And once that is done, now the hacker has remote access to that machine. And so now the final step is for that HR person or that initial person who is looking at this resume, and this is what we do here. Here's a candidate we're very interested in. Send it out to the other key guys to take a look at and say, hey, I think this looks good. Should we bring them in? Right? And so now we're potentially spreading this to 1 other, 2 other, maybe a whole team of folks depending on the organization, and it's basically going to repeat these steps. And you know, the whole idea here is as you're moving this along from manager to manager, you're potentially getting into, especially as you're going into IT, you know, if this is going to an IT director or a CIO, they probably have escalated privileges on the network already, and so now they've got themselves a great target machine with which to start exfiltrating data, right? So what do we do? How do we defend against this, right? And Todd was kind of asking about this just a minute ago here, absolute first thing is have the appropriate patches applied. If you had all of the patches applied at the time of the attack, it simply wouldn't work. No matter how easily it got through the firewall, the shell door piece would have never come across because you never would have been able to use the Windows intruder or the Word intruder service to compromise, right? So that's the very first thing. Next thing, let's stop this at the firewall, right? A good UTM can defend against command and control communication. Now, where we could still be vulnerable in this specific situation is if you are using TeamViewer and you have created a specific rule for it to get out through the firewall. Now, if we're taking advantage of application control on the UTM, we should still be able to detect that malicious traffic and shut it down, even if you've whitelisted that protocol to be good, right? So that's where we want to have a good UTM. We want to take advantage of DLP or data leak prevention so that even if the attack is successful, we're preventing sensitive data from exfilling from the environment or being misappropriated over the network in any way. Next thing we might want to do is leverage sandboxing at the gateway where we can run suspicious data in a controlled environment to be able to prove out if it contains threats. You know, in a sandbox, you're really just executing that code. You're not trying to review the header and see if it looks bad. You're not trying to scan deep into it and see if it contains anything malicious. You're actually just running it in a controlled environment, and if it ends up being bad, you're going to see the results of that, and you're going to be able to take the necessary action. Right? Next thing that we might want to do is contain the attack by enforcing sensitive data storage in encrypted repositories, and then you got to stay on top of access control to limit access to only those identities that need it. And that's tricky, especially in a large environment where people are moving you know, laterally throughout the organization or up and down in the organization, and their permissions are changing. It can be difficult to stay on top of it, but that's where we do see a lot of breaches starting to occur, is with old identities or identities that have gained additional permissions but haven't had their old permissions removed, and it's a challenge to stay on top of that. Application whitelist policy that blocks and alerts to rogue applications being launched and run is another thing that we can do, right? So if we're setting up controls where we have a kind of a golden image or a golden machine that's saying this is the applications that are allowed to run, no new applications are going to be allowed to run, that would block shell door from being able to take effect and be able to launch the initial command and control communications, right? So lots of different things we can do there. And probably not last, but the last on my bullets, you know, is get visibility into those logs to detect abnormal behavior so you can respond as quickly as attacks are happening, right? And that's where a solid SIM solution is coming in. And you know, SIM is going to be somewhat proactive. When we talk to a lot of folks, you know, one of the first things, especially if they're new to this, that they say is, well, wait a minute, you're really talking about reactive. We're used to talking to security people about being proactive. And part of the challenge in today's, you know, pervasive threat landscape is they're looking at all of these tools as a template of what not to do, of how to get around something, right? So if you build a fence, as soon as you're done building the fence, I now have your template for how your fence is built, and I can start figuring out how am I going to tunnel through it, over it, under it, around it, blow it up, whatever I'm going to do. And so we do want to be proactive, but we also need to be able to react. And we're having that conversation more and more with customers is, what are you doing to be able to react as quickly as possible? What you don't want to do is start reacting 6 months down the road, 7 months down the road. Right? So some other things you can do. End user education. Easier said than done. I know that to be a fact, not only from our own environment, but from talking to all of you folks. One of the easiest things you can do, though, to really start testing your organization is throwing out some sample phishing emails yourself and see who in your organization is responding, and then being able to do maybe some mini education classes for the folks who are most likely to respond to a phishing attempt so that they can understand what's going on here, why this is bad, why they have to be careful on clicking on stuff from emails that maybe even kind of look like they're from somebody legitimate but are slightly off, right? We're big fans of the multi-vendor approach. Everybody likes to envision this ideal where we're going to get to all of our security products in one single pane of glass. The challenge there, though, is you're not going to find a product that covers everything that you need to do. And when you do take advantage of a multi-vendor strategy, you have the benefit to take advantage of multiple R&D organizations who are doing nothing but thinking about threats, reviewing threats, thinking about what hackers are doing, trying to figure out what their next move is going to be, and a lot of times with a global eye on the security landscape, right, which then they're providing back to you to be able to leverage in your environment. Third-party assessments are great. Have somebody from the outside come in and take a look at what you're doing, run some scans, run some tests, and try and help you see where your lowest points of protection are, where your highest points, maybe where you're overprotected, where you're underprotected. And if you're doing a great job, even just get a pat on the back and say, hey, keep it up. And then lastly, here's how we keep evolving, right? Because what we're doing today might not be enough for tomorrow. Some of the stuff that we're doing today might not be needed tomorrow. There might be some other things that we need to be thinking about. And so evolution has to be a part of our game plan. All right? Now, we're pretty focused on this CareerBuilder attack today, right? So if you're thinking to yourself, well, you know what, we don't use CareerBuilder, so we're not really worried about this, this kind of thing here. If you haven't heard about them, you probably be seeing them in the news here shortly. If you're looking around, if you pay attention to a lot of the security media. APT28 is a hacking group out of Russia. And they're not responsible for the CareerBuilder attack, but they did have, up until recently, a nice exploit kit containing 6 zero-day vulnerabilities going against Microsoft Office, Adobe Reader, Adobe Flash, and Java. So 6 different opportunities to compromise, and they're basically doing the same thing. They're launching a phishing scheme. They're using the vulnerabilities to get a backdoor dropper installed so that they can remote control and communicate via command and control server to exfiltrate data. Now, they're going after Eastern European governments. They're going after nuclear facilities. They're going after NATO, based out of Russia. They're also going after internal dissidents in Russia and enemies of the Russian state. And pretty soon, if not already, we're going to see their exploit kits probably for sale on the dark web to be used by whoever's buying them any way that they want to use them, right? And so that's where we got to be thinking about, even though we're not nervous about the CareerBuilder threat. I'm not a CareerBuilder customer, so I'm not too worried about something coming through via CareerBuilder, but I still need to have the same concerns because these attacks are happening everywhere, right? So, Todd, I'll kick it back over to you. Happy to answer any questions, but let's talk a little bit about some of the softwares we love.
Yeah, totally. Well, thanks. That's really good in terms of what to think about. And yeah, the point is, today it's CareerBuilder, tomorrow it's something else, right? And as long as you have humans working in your environment, there's going to be exploits. So the phishing attacks, the types of attacks are becoming more sophisticated. So as we've talked about in another series, it's not a matter of if your environment is compromised, but when and to what extent. So really the stuff we talk about, the solutions we're selling, help you to be more proactive, give you better visibility, and to have a better approach. And so when something does happen, you can shut it off more quickly. You know that it's trying to happen, right? You can limit the damage as opposed to finding out months, weeks, or years later, or seeing it in the news, right? Or finding out that thousands of your transactions or millions of your customers have been breached. That's the expensive way. So we have, you know, a range of products that we love, everything from the endpoint to a very sophisticated, you know, a DLP, I'll say, or data in motion type technology with Securio, a SIM and logarithm, Tenable, which is right, the Nessus scanner. If you guys have been around for a while, probably know that open source product. Data Gravity, very sophisticated DLP, and you know, great base security suite with Kaspersky Labs. We love them. We think they're great. And your account exec can talk to you more about what pains you're having and what might be appropriate. Maybe some of these solutions might be something else, may just be, hey, tweak this, try that, what have you. So with that, I will say thank you very much for coming. 30 minutes is a chunk out of your day, so we appreciate that you spent that time with us. If you like what we talked about, you like the content, let us know. If we were off base in any way, or there was something else you want to see, let us know. We put these on for your benefit. Like I mentioned, your account exec will give you a shout out, make sure that we have all your proper info for those gift cards, and really myself, Todd Obert, along with Pete Greco, wish you a fantastic balance of your day and week, and hopefully we'll talk soon. Thanks, everybody.